Eliza and Danica were a study in impossible opposites. Eliza was rhythm and late-night heat, her body a blur of motion, in exotic dance rehearsals that lasted until the sun came up. Danica was the silence of a library, logic, strategy, and the cold, calculated world of online chess. They were each other's home, a perfect equilibrium where fire met frost. But the world is a hungry thing, and it eventually pulled them toward separate horizons. Eliza moved to the city to turn her sweat into art, while Danica climbed the ivory towers of the country's top university. At first, the distance was just a measurement. They had their daily calls, sharing every small victory and minor defeat. But slowly, the city's pulse became louder for Eliza, and the academic pressure grew heavier for Danica. Daily calls dissolved into weekly updates. Weekly updates turned into monthly texts. Eventually, the texts stopped altogether. A silence settled between them that lasted years, a quiet, aching void where their friendship used to live. They weren't enemies, they were just becoming strangers who knew each other's secrets. 5 years passed like a whirlwind for Eliza. She wasn't just a dancer anymore, she was a brand. She moved with a confidence that commanded every room, her name appearing on trophies and posters across the city. On the morning she officially signed the lease for her own dance studio, she felt invincible. She stood in the empty, sun-drenched space, imagining the mirrors filled with students and the air thick with bass. She was finally the sun at the center of her own universe. She had won. While Eliza was winning, Danica was losing. The ivory towers had become a cage. The logic she prided herself on couldn't solve the chaos of her personal life. On the very same day, Eliza was popping champagne at her studio. Danica was walking down a sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital hallway. She felt like a shadow of the woman she used to be. The cold strategy she had mastered for chess, useless against the crushing weight of her reality. She was alone, navigating a world that had no place for her struggle. Danica sat on the edge of a cold hospital bed, clutching a positive pregnancy test until the plastic crinkled in her palm. She reached for her phone, hoping for a lifeline, only to see the blocked notification from the man she thought loved her. At that exact moment, miles away, Eliza was laughing under the camera flashes of a local news crew, her future looking like liquid gold. One was becoming a star, reaching the pinnacle of her dreams. The other was becoming a ghost, disappearing into a nightmare she never saw coming. The bridge between them was gone. 5 years later, The high school gym didn't smell like old sneakers anymore. It smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. Eliza didn't just walk into the room. She ignited it. She arrived in a dress that looked like liquid gold poured over her skin. Every movement echoing the power and independence she had fought to build. She was a sensation now, a strictly solo force of nature who didn't need anyone to lead her across the floor. She smiled at faces she barely remembered, playing the part of the star, but her eyes were restless, searching for the one person who had been her home before the world got loud. Across the room, Danica was a different kind of masterpiece. She hadn't been defeated by the shadows. She had used them to sharpen her edges. Dressed in a suit that cost more than a month's rent, she stood with a polished, untouchable grace. She was a corporate executive in the making, navigating the crowd with the same cold strategy she used to use for chess. Her eyes were calm, her silhouette commanding the space around her. She looked like a woman who had never known a moment of weakness. But beneath the professional armor, she was counting the minutes until she could go back to the one life that actually mattered, her son. Amidst the clinking of champagne glasses and the forced laughter of people trying to out-success each other, it happened. Their eyes met across the crowded floor. The 5 years of silence, the monthly texts, the blocked calls, it all vanished in a heartbeat. The rhythm of the room seemed to slow down. Eliza's fire and Danica's logic reached for each other across the distance, and they began to move, drawn together by a gravity they hadn't felt in a decade. But before they could speak, the battlefield claimed its first victim. A former jock, his face flushed with too much whiskey and a lifetime of peaked in high school bitterness, and blocked Danica's path. He leaned in, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, sneering at her success. "Nice suit, Danica. How what? Does it help hide the fact that you're just another struggling single mum?" He laughed a jagged, ugly sound. "A top-tier degree, and you still couldn't keep a man to help with the kid? Huh?" Danica froze, her corporate cool clashing with the sudden sharp sting of a public wound. She opened her mouth to deploy a calculated rebuttal, but she never got the chance. So before the man could breathe out his next insult, Eliza was there. She didn't just step in, she took over the space. She slipped an arm around Danica's waist, her gold dress shimmering like a warning. "She isn't struggling, and she isn't alone," Eliza said, her voice cutting through the gin like a blade. She looked the man up and down with devastating boredom before looking at the entire room. "Seize mine. And if you have a problem with her life, you have a problem with me." The room went dead silent, and Danica looked at Eliza, the logic of her world shattering to make room for a new kind of fire. The reunion was over. The explosion had just begun. The reunion had been the spark, but the weeks that followed were the fire. Eliza's public claim wasn't just a gesture of protection. It was a confession. "I never found a partner," Eliza told her one night, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Because no one had your mind. No one made the world feel quiet." So Danica, the woman of logic, finally found something she couldn't calculate. She admitted she had stopped looking for love because she thought her life was finished. Just her and her son, Andy. They realized they weren't just two friends anymore. They were two halves of a whole they had been trying to build separately. Merging their lives was like mixing gold and marble. Eliza brought the rhythm, the laughter, and the Momo energy that turned every morning into a dance. Danica remained the anchor, the mama, who provided the structure, the logic, and the steady hand. So together, they created a world that functioned on its own frequency. They weren't just a couple, they were a fortress. They set a third chair at their table, permanent spot for the life they were building together. A chair for a family the world didn't always know how to label, but one that was more solid than any tradition. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals and boardroom meetings, they found themselves in Andy's bedroom. The air was warm, smelling of lavender and the soft scent of a sleeping child. Young Andy lay tucked under his covers, his small chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Eliza and Danica stood on either side of the bed, their hands meeting over his sleeping form. The room felt suspended in time, a bubble of peace that the rest of the world couldn't touch. In this moment, the third chair wasn't just furniture, it was a promise. They began to whisper, their voices a dreamlike haze in the dim light. They looked at the wooden blocks kind of scattered on the floor and imagined a brilliant architect. They thought of his steady hands and saw a world-class surgeon. They heard his humming and saw a soulful singer or a famous actor commanding a stage. "He's going to change things," Eliza whispered, her eyes bright with the Momo pride. So Danica nodded, her logical mind already mapping out the best schools and the brightest futures. They were so lost in the beauty of the boy they hoped he would be. They couldn't see the reality of who he was becoming. They stood there for a long time, two successful women basking in the glow of their perfect creation. They felt invincible, certain that their love was a shield that could protect Andy from any hardship. They drifted off to sleep that night in a haze of golden dreams, completely unaware of the friction growing in the boy's heart. They didn't know that the child they were dreaming of was destined to become the very storm that would test their patience, their peace, and their power. The boy wasn't going to build the world they imagined. He was going to tear it down. So 10 years passed, and the third chair grew heavy, still standing together. Eliza and Danica have built a life of luxury and influence. But the boy they raised in the glow of their dreams had changed. Andy was 13 now, and the Momo and Mama, who once whispered over his sleeping form, were now strangers to his silence. The architect they imagined was nowhere to be found. In his place was a teenager with a jaw like flint and eyes that looked through them rather than at them. The house was no longer a fortress of peace. It was a holding cell, waiting for the next spark to fly. So for Eliza and Danica, the principal's office had become a normal field trip, and they sat in the same small chairs they once occupied at corporate boards and dance galas, listening to reports of Andy's latest defiance. Writing lines, detention, and quiet warnings had become the background noise of their lives. They tried everything: Danica's logic, Eliza's empathy, but Andy seemed to speak a language they couldn't translate. They kept waiting for the phase to end, for the brilliant doctor or the soulful singer to emerge. They didn't realize the storm wasn't passing, it was gathering strength. Last night the storm finally broke. It wasn't a prank or a schoolyard scuffle. It was a coordinated, cold-blooded act of vandalism that pushed them to the edge of their sanity. While they were discussing his future over wine, Andy was out in the city, fueled by a rage they hadn't bothered to measure. He didn't just break a window or spray paint a wall. He struck at the very heart of the city's order. When the call came from the precinct at 3 in the morning, the third chair felt like it was finally about to collapse. The precinct was a world of fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee, a far cry from the liquid gold of Eliza's studio or the marble of Danica's office. The two successful women sat in stunned silence, their expensive clothes looking out of place against the grey walls. Andy sat between them, his face a mask of unrepentant coldness. He didn't look like a boy who had made a mistake. He looked like a soldier who had just finished a mission. A weary police officer sat across from them, sliding a heavy folder across the metal desk. The sound of the paper hitting the surface echoed like a gunshot. The officer leaned forward, his eyes tired. He systematically smashed 3 sets of city traffic lights with a metal bat, he said, his voice flat. Eliza gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, but it was the officer's next words that broke them. He says he did it as a protest. He's tired of the world looking at his mums like a red light they're waiting to change. Danica's logic failed her as the officer closed file. The school has expelled him and the city is pressing charges. Ladies, the boy you dreamed would be a doctor just became a liability. The dream was dead. The reality was just beginning.